murders that took place on a warm night in the summer of 1969 in Benedict Canyon, a hilly suburb of Los Angeles, are among the most bizarre and gruesome in the history of Hollywood. Sharon Tate, who was pregnant at the time of her murder, and 4 of her houseguests were murdered in cold blood because they happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The name of the killer, Charles Manson, still strikes fear into the hearts of those who hear it, even though it has been decades since the crime was committed. Sharon Marie Tate was born to Paul Tate, a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army, and Doris on July 13, 1943, in Dallas, Texas. Sharon Tate, the eldest of 3 daughters, moved around quite a bit as a child because of her father's military career. She lived in no less than 6 different cities. Her family never actively supported or discouraged her pursuit of a career in show business, despite early indications of interest and aptitude in the field. During the years after 1960, when the family was still living in Italy, the stunning Sharon won several beauty contests and was named homecoming queen at the Vicenza American High School in Verona, Italy. Sharon, always on the lookout for new opportunities, found work as an extra in movies shooting in Italy. Sharon's father's transfer to California in 1962 was a fortunate break that came at just the right time. The beautiful blonde's path to fame and notoriety would be set in stone by this fortuitous opportunity. In less than a year, Sharon was appearing in commercials and small roles on television shows like the Beverly Hillbillies, where she played Janet Trego. While filming Eye of the Devil in England, Sharon would run into Polish-born director Roman Polanski. After some convincing, Polanski put Sharon in the lead female role of his 1967 film The Fearless Vampire Killers. In order to complete the picture, the two would have to fall in love, get married, and settle down together in Santa Monica. It was predicted in a 1967 article in Playboy magazine that 1967 would be the year that Sharon Tate happens, in reference to her meteoric rise to movie stardom. Around the same time, in San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury, a homeless but sociable ex-con named Charles Manson, also known as Charlie Manson, was gathering a group of misfits, cretins, and hippies together. However, after leaving a trail of destruction in their wake, Charles Manson and his family relocated to Los Angeles, settling in on the Spawn movie ranch, the sprawling pastures of which had served as the setting for many classic westerns in the 1950s and 1960s. Manson was the type to make up wild, uninformed prophecies of doom and gloom based on sources like the Bible and the Beatles, and it didn't take long for him to unleash his murderous hordes on the Hollywood hills. His intent was to lay out what he saw as the road to destruction, as revealed to him in hallucinogenic readings of Revelations 9 and the words from the Beatles' White Album. The black race would destroy a third man, the white race, also known as pigs, while he and 4 other long-haired angels, the Beatles, with shields of fire, electric guitars and brimstone voices, his and theirs, would descend from a bottomless pit, Death Valley, the ranch, the establishment. In other words, Manson thought that the establishment would collapse if he unleashed chaos in the white man's world through murder and mayhem. Wow. Imagine me doodling clock hands and cuckooing my ears. Sharon's final meal was at the El Coyote restaurant in Los Angeles. A very pregnant Sharon, awaiting the return from Europe of her husband and the father of their child, Roman Polanski, would decline an invitation to a small celebratory dinner party on the evening of August 8, 1969, opting instead to grab a quick bite at her favorite restaurant, El Coyote, with her friends J.C. Bring, celebrity hairstylist, Wojtek Frykowski, playboy, and Abigail Folger, coffee empire heiress. At around 10:30 o'clock in the evening, the group would head back to her place at 10,050 Cielo Drive. When the maid arrived the next morning to start cleaning, she was met with a terrifying sight. There were several bodies, some of which were still bloody, all over the house and yard. Charles Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Kronwinkel, and Linda Kasabian. Kronwinkel had been introduced to Charles Manson by Beach Boy Dennis Wilson. Would supposedly drive out to Sharon's estate late at night, take acid, scale the embankment to bypass the locked security gate, climb the telephone pole to cut the phone lines, and then make their way down the dimly lit driveway to the house. Kasabian was going to keep watch from outside the perimeter fence. As the three murderers approached the home, they were greeted by Steve Parent, a friend of the housekeeper, who was leaving the property in his car. Watson planned on stabbing Parent in the throat and shooting him 4 times in the face. We can assume with a high degree of certainty that Parent passed away almost instantly. That Posap was literally in the wrong place at the wrong time. When they finally made it to the house, Tex helped the girls cut a hole in the screen so he could crawl inside. Inside, they ordered everyone to assemble in the living room in a human shield formation in front of the fireplace. J.C. Bring was killed after a fight broke out and someone shot him. At that point, everyone started to fight and flee. Wojciech Frykowski tried to escape through the front door but was quickly apprehended and subjected to 2 gunshot wounds, 51 stab wounds, and more than a dozen blows to the head with a pistol butt. He may have passed away rapidly, but he endured considerable pain in his final hours. In the neighborhood, Folger tried to escape through the back bedroom door but was caught in the lawn, where she was stabbed only 28 times and left in a white dress that looked crimson from the massive loss of her own blood. Sharon and J.C. Bring were found inside the house with a white cord around their necks that was draped across a lofty support beam. A bullet had pierced Sebring's face, and he had been stabbed 7 times. In total, Sharon sustained 16 stab wounds to the back and chest. According to reports, as Sharon was being stabbed, she begged her killers not to kill her unborn child. Atkins' response to her pleading was always the same: "I don't care about you or your baby." Wow, these folks are really nice. The word pig was scrawled in Sharon's blood on the outside of the door. The white establishment, which Charles Manson evidently believed Sharon Tate represented. William Garrettson, the estate's caretaker, was alone in the caretaker's quarters, which were separated from the main house. He did not hear the screams because his stereo was blasting, and he was also spared from the carnage that night. Initially detained for questioning, Garrettson was eventually released. Before Steve Parent was shot and killed near the security gate, he and Garrettson had met briefly to discuss the sale of a radio. No widespread anarchy had yet broken out, so the Manson family must have more to say. Manson himself, along with Watson, Kronwinkel, and another willing participant named Leslie Van Houten, went to the Los Feliz home of Leno and Rosemary LaBianca on the night of August 10th and bound them with buckskin thongs. Charles Manson would have his henchmen kill the couple and leave something witchy behind before he would leave the house. Leno had 12 cuts from knives and 14 more from what appeared to be a large fork used for serving meat. Then a knife was used to carve the word war into his flesh. The fork was still sticking out of his neck when the police arrived. Rosemary was discovered in her room with a lamp cord around her neck and a bloody pillowcase pulled over her head. No widespread anarchy had yet broken out, So the Manson family must have more to say. Manson himself, along with Watson, Krenwinkel, and another willing participant named Leslie Van Houten, went to the Los Feliz home of Leno and Rosemary LaBianca on the night of August 10th and bound them with buckskin thongs. Charles Manson would have his henchmen kill the couple and leave something witchy behind before he would leave the house. Leno had 12 cuts from knives and 14 more from what appeared to be a large fork used for serving meat. Then a knife was used to carve the word war into his flesh. The fork was still sticking out of his neck when the police arrived. Rosemary was discovered in her room with a lamp cord around her neck and a bloody pillowcase pulled over her head. They stabbed her 41 times in the lower back and groin. I can't believe how angry they are. Messages, similar to those left the night before, appeared to attempt to explain Charles Manson's prophecy. Bloody graffiti read "Rise" and "Death to Pigs" on the walls. Helter-skelter Krenwinkel's misspelling. "Not mine" was also written in marker on the refrigerator door. After committing a heinous act, the killers would reward themselves with a tasty snack of milk and sandwiches. It's unbelievable that they ate out of the same refrigerator that was contaminated with victim blood just minutes earlier. However, the police were eventually able to round up Manson and his followers. Because of an oversight in the course of an investigation into a car theft ring, they were arrested while hiding out at the Spahn Ranch. A short time later, however, the charges were dropped, and Manson, fearing that the police were closing in on him, relocated his family to the Barker Ranch, what's with all the ranchers, in the middle of Death Valley, where he began preparing for Helter Skelter, the performance he believed would mark the beginning of the end. He prepared his followers for battle by arming them and teaching them hand-to-hand combat. This guy reminds me a lot of that nut in Waco, Texas, doesn't he? In any case, Manson was taken into custody on October 12, 1969, at the Barker Ranch. The Manson family and their associates were found guilty and given prison terms for their atrocities. All four were scheduled to meet their end in a gas chamber in the state of California. However, in a final irony, on February 18, 1972, the California State Supreme Court abolished the death penalty because it was considered too cruel and unusual. This meant that the victims of Charles Manson, Patricia Krenwinkel, Charles Tex Watson, Leslie Van Houten, and Susan Atkins were not subjected to the same fate as the perpetrators. The murderers are still rotting in prison. Manson can be seen at Corcoran State Prison, north of Los Angeles, slurping soup and making tin bird houses. His parole application has been rejected for the 11th time in a row, even though he is still technically eligible for release. At Holy Cross Memorial Park in Culver City, California, over 200 mourners gathered for Sharon Tate's funeral. Upon his wife's death, Roman Polanski would travel back home to bury her alongside their unborn son, Paul Richard. The words "beloved wife of Roman, Sharon Tate Polanski, Paul Richard Polanski," their baby, are etched into Sharon's white marble tombstone. Sharon had just turned 26.